Let's talk about Daniel Holtzclau's case, because at this point, it is a textbook example of how wrongful convictions happen here in America. You start with the basics. This was a he said, she said case. There were no witnesses that observed a crime. A very grainy surveillance video of a traffic stop. There was no corroborating evidence of a sexual assault. The SANE exam came back negative. The case should have ended right then. And yet Daniel was given a 263 years in prison. Now let's look at the incentives. The accusers had something to gain. Some had open criminal charges, there were fines, there were court debt. We know charges were dropped, fines were reduced, and ultimately there was a very large civil lawsuit waiting at the end. Those incentives matter. They matter in every wrongful conviction case. Now, look at the detectives. We're talking about detectives who left critical statements out of official police reports. They're not minor details, they're major details about whether the allegations matched reality or not. That's not an accident. That's not an oversight. That's how narratives get manufactured. Then you have selective targeting. The detectives chose which women they wanted to pursue, and then they chose when to record and when not to record allegations. Now ask yourself this. Why would investigators selectively record? Why would they turn on the recorders for some accusations and not for others? And then remember, this wasn't a random suspect. They knew who they were identifying as a suspect. The standards should have been higher. They were investigating a police officer. And then we get Detective Kim Davis, a sex crime detective for almost 30 years, claiming she doesn't have a work phone. Who has ever heard of an on-call police detective with no work phone? It's unbelievable. And it matters because it's about accountability and traceability of communication during an active investigation. But it gets worse. On page 2387 on the trial transcript, Lieutenant Tim Musney admits that they were racially profiling to generate accusations. In his own words, I was looking for, like I said, black females, drug or prostitution history that had some form of an arrest. I wrote their names down on a piece of paper so I could have their names. Then I looked up their name on Varuna, and then once I found their Varuna history and I looked at their Varuna history and saw that it was consistent with what we were looking for, I printed off that Varuna sheet as well. That's not following evidence. That's going out into the community and manufacturing accusations. Then you layer the forensic side. The lead detective, Rocky Gregory, his mother-in-law was the state's forensic analyst on the same case. Yes, you heard that right. The mother-in-law of the detective helping build the case is analyzing the forensic evidence for the state. That is a conflict of interest that they did not disclose to us. We found out after trial, but that's so extreme that, if you were to see that in a movie, you'd call that lazy writing, but it happened here. And it mattered because her trial testimony was presented as scientific when it was outside of her scope of practice. She implied certainty that DNA proved guilt when the actual science said something different. And then after trial, 6 forensic experts reviewed her testimony and the DNA claims. 6. All of them raised serious issues. Now, if you haven't read that report yet, you should. It is compelling, and it makes one thing painfully clear, that DNA is powerful, and when used correctly and catastrophic when it's used incorrectly. Now, after the post-trial disasters, when you hear about Daniel's trial judge, Tim Henderson, is now barred for having sexual relationships with multiple assistant district attorneys. This is the same judge who presided in Daniel's case and then who held those 2-day secret hearings related to the forensic analyst's work. Hearings that Daniel's attorney and Daniel was not even notified or was even present because they weren't notified. I'll attach those, here, because we know that it's involving more than just Daniel's case. And I showed you guys that a few weeks back whenever I posted the video on how it's involving multiple people, multiple cases. And we know that because of the open records request emails where DA Prater asked specifically for other people, other assistant DAs, what other cases did Elaine Taylor worked on. Now, this case has so much. And for that, Daniel was given 263 years in prison for a case with no physical evidence. This case needs to be reopened. It needs sunlight. And people need to understand that wrongful convictions don't always look like the movies. Sometimes they look exactly like this. Because there is zero evidence that justifies putting a man behind bars for 263 years. 263 years. And the more people actually look at the documents, the transcripts, the reports, and the post-trial misconduct, the more obvious it becomes that this conviction is not just flawed, it is indefensible. Please look at freedanielholtzclaw.com. All Daniel wants is for every single person to just look at the case. Look at the facts. Do research. Go to google.com and put in deleted emails, Daniel Holtzclaw. Boom. What pops up? Forensic analyst emails are deleted. Look up sealed hearings, Daniel Holtzclaw. Boom. What pops up? 2-day secret hearings where your defense attorney is not even present, not even notified, not even allowed to attend, yet they're analyzing the forensic analyst's work that was on your case. That hearing was about Daniel's case and others. We have the receipts, guys. It takes a village to overturn a conviction. So I'm hoping that you guys take some time. I hope this video reaches more people. Please share it. It takes a village to overturn wrongful convictions. Right now, we're on year 10. They say average to overturn wrongful convictions between 11 to 14 years. We want that to happen. Daniel dreams of that day all the time. We're just waiting for it to happen. We need more support. We need more of you guys looking into it. Because if this could happen to Daniel as a police officer, imagine how many other people that these detectives in Oklahoma City Police Department had a hold of. How many other cases his forensic analyst effed up on. Excuse my language, but I want to say, how many others? freedanielholtzclaw.com. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.